to have with us Dr. Kamei Samson, who was recently our colleague at NMML. He is now assistant professor at the G.B.Pant Social Science Institute at Prayagraj. Dr. Samson is a young person, but he has impressive achievements to his credit. He did his PhD from the Tata Institute of Social Science, Mumbai. He was a junior fellow at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, a fellow at the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, and a postdoctoral fellow of the Indian Council of Social Science Research. He has also worked as a researcher in the Department of Tribal Studies at the Indian Social Institute, New Delhi. He has specialized in social movements, tribal issues, cultural studies, identity, racism, and social psychology. Manohar will be bringing out his book, The Resilience of Indigenous Religions, shortly. Now, the topic of today's talk is a matter of interest for all of us. The rites of identity, understanding customary practices among Rongmei Christians. Now, this paper that he's going to present seeks to understand how converts to other religions, in this case Christianity, reconcile their customary practices, that is moral and social conduct, and religious traditions with their new faith. What is particularly fascinating is his definition of customary practices as representatives of the will of the divine entity, that is to be worshipped and revered. He points out that religious adherence to one's totem still remains a feature of the customary practices of the tribals. Christianity is normally believed to discourage continuance of customary practices that were an important constituent of a person's identity. Now, Dr. Samson tells us that in the last century, towards the close of the last century, there has been an important movement among the Christian community in Manipur and Nagaland that he has studied, and which seeks to re-identify and reclaim the customary practices and old identities of these communities. So this is an issue which is of importance and relevance, not only in the context of the Northeast, but other parts of India as well, where we see that once a person converts to another religion, he or she normally breaks off all links with the heritage of that person or community. So welcome, Dr. Samson. We look forward to your talk. Please start.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the introduction that you have made. It has really made me very humble. At the outset, my sincere gratitude and my respect to the director, deputy director, the senior colleagues of Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. Nothing of this work would have been possible without the selfless support that I received from the esteemed institute with which I had been associated for some time. And my gratitude shall always remain. Today's topic which I'm trying to present, in fact, has been very lucidly put forward before the listeners, before the learned listeners by our madam, before whom my scholarship is nothing. So thank you so much, ma'am. The rights of identity, the rights of identity, that is, which is the topic of my presentation today, is something which I have been thinking about for quite some time. I have in fact read the work of Arnold van Gennep, Vita Turner, uh, the anthropological works on the rights. And having read their work, I realized that I was able to connect with what is happening within our community or within the uh, tribal communities at large, or especially in the context of the Nagas. And I also found that there is something missing in the present theories on the rites of passage as propounded by Arnold van Gennep, and also further illuminated and further contributed by Vita Turner with his idea of communitas and liminality in the ritual process. And this topic has been very crucial for me because this is not just a topic for me, this is not just a theme of research for me, this is in fact a lived reality. It is my lived experiences that I'm going to talk about. And during one of the days uh, at Nehru Memorial, we were in fact uh, called by our deputy director to interact with him regarding our work in the Nehru Memorial. So we were asked, what is it that we are trying to contribute through our work? And in fact, that brief conversation we had with the deputy director made me think very deeply, and it really felicitated me to think further into my topic and come up with at least some contribution within the domain of theory on the rituals. And with that, I in fact have I believe that I have successfully come out with a theoretical contribution, that is my theory on the rights of identity, which I try to substantiate on the existing theory on the rights by Arnold van Gennep and Vita Turner. Next slide. Now, having looked into some of the existing literatures, we find that rituals are very crucial in our life, whether it is in the religious domain or whether it is our daily mundane life, whether it is religious or non-religious, because the idea of rite or the idea of ritual is something not typical of religion. The idea or the connotation of ritual can also extend beyond the boundary, beyond the frontier of religion. So what we do every day may also be considered as something ritual. But it's not necessarily that what we do every day is always considered as a ritual. Maybe something that we do in a very specific manner, in a very special manner, which is very rare, may also be considered as a ritual, and they usually fall within what is called religious rituals. And rituals are also very crucial. If you look amongst the Nadar Hindus in South India, we find that the Nadar Hindus, they try to use the rituals so that they create a higher position for themselves through the practice of the rituals. So rituals are also very crucial in order to have a very meaningful interaction with the entities that we worship. And also at the same time, it also helps us to establish a social position for ourselves, or rather a respectable position in the society. And for today's presentation, or rather the topic that I'm working on, I follow what Vita Turner would say about the social world. For him, social world is always in a state of becoming, and it is something not static. It is not something static as a structural functionalist would view, but rather it is a continuous process towards becoming. And also, it is also something which is continuously flowing like a dangerous tide, and which is never known to be stopped, which is never known to stop. So for me, ritual is something very dynamic, and it is a very dynamic process of a life, which further contributes to our conception of ourself and the group, meaning our conception of our identity. So identity does, for me, is also a very dynamic process, just as the ritual, which is part of our daily, or which is also part of our rare life processes. And trying to understand rites, I have depended heavily on the work of Victor Turner and Arnold van Gennep. So it is a prescribed formal behavior for certain occasion, which may not be considered as something which is routine or something which is happening very in a regular fashion manner. And it has something to do with the mystical beings or the supernatural powers we revere or we respect, or maybe even we fear. So rituals also, according to Van Gennep, rituals also helps us to understand the kind of the movement that we witness in the various stages of our life. In fact, for Arnold Van Gennep, when he studies the rituals, for him, what is important is not the rituals per se, but in the process of study of the ritual, what is found by Van Gennep is the emergence of a pattern. So for him, the study of these patterns across social groups or a pattern of rituals even within a group is something which attracted him. So the process which gives him to understand, which gives him a light, throws light on on the pattern of the ritual is something very crucial for him. And uh, according to Victor Turner, he sees that in the study of the ritual process, there is something which is structured, but not necessarily permanently structured, but it becomes anti-structure again. It gets into a certain process, and then it comes back again to the earlier state. So structure, anti-structure, structure. This process, this cyclical process is witnessed by Victor Turner in the study of the ritual process. And uh, rituals manifest social structure and perform specific functions, and they are very crucial in order for us to understand the interrelationship that is prevalent amongst the uh, different groups of the structured system of the society. And now, rituals may also be a shift from routine work and life. So for Graben, we find that the idea of rites or the idea of ritual is shifted from a religious domain, from the religious domain. For him, even the idea of going out, let's say a family going out on a tour, say enjoying a tourism, is also considered as ritual, or rather a modern ritual. In fact, I have a friend who was in fact planning to, who in fact went along with his other family members to Bangalore to visit some of the Catholic churches. So I was in fact very lightheartedly telling him, since he was my childhood friend, I used to tell him, so okay, friends, now you're now into religious tourism. So he seemed to be a little annoyed, but then since we were childhood, it was uh, rather taken lightly from his side, from by him too. So now the idea of ritual, in fact, is also uh, made something very mundane, even in our daily life. So what we do every day, or what we try to do, something which is very much outside the domain of the religion, may also be understood as something which is ritualized. And I just want to bring here this the context of this Gons tribe, the Gons people, and in the report submitted by Panda and Professor Panda and Sahu, the traditional communal hunting, which was common among the Gons tribes in Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan areas. In fact, because of the scarcity of the resources, and also because of certain forest rights promulgated by the state, they are not able to live their life, the traditional ways of life, the customary practices concerning the rituals of hunting the animals. So there may also be interface, or rather state culture interface, when we may also need to take into account of the state culture interface when we study what is called rites or other rituals. Now, rituals may be, in fact, rituals are, or the rather rites are predominantly conceived to be religious. So they may be rites of passage, which is very common in the work of Arnold van Gennep, which in fact, he theorized that uh, in every stages of our life, we have associated rituals to mark the leaving of certain stage of life and then to mark the entry into a new stage of life. So he called it the rites of passage, passage from one stage of life to the other. So there may also be what we may call devotional rites, meaning how to pray. The children are often advised or taught to fold their hands, bow down before the god, and then receive the prasad or receive the blessings of the priest. So there are patterns of worship, patterns of devotion. So certain behaviors are in fact marked out as sacred or more appropriate for rituals which are religious in nature. And of course, there are also other non-religious rituals. For instance, greeting the elders, saying namaste, namaskar, or shaking hands, or giving a place to sit for the elders when you are in a public. So these kind of behaviors are ritualized, are in fact uh, considered to be considered to be sacred rather. And according to Victor Turner, the rites are broadly classified into rites of life crisis, which is the rites of passage, as we see in the work of Arnold van Gennep, and calendrical rites, meaning, for instance, we have certain rituals performed before the sowing of the seeds, certain rituals performed before the reaping of the harvest. So there are certain rites which are performed once in a year, depending on the 4 seasons in a year. And now, as I have talked about two broad types of rites, that is religious and non-religious. Now for me, the kind of rituals that I'm going to talk about here in my work is primarily concerned with the religious rites. So a question may also be asked whether rituals can be without any belief, without any religious belief. But Shields would say the beliefs could exist. Our beliefs could exist without rituals, but rituals, however, could not exist without beliefs, because whatever that we do, we do not do just for the sake of doing. Whatever we do, there is a reason behind it, and the reason is belief, and primarily religious belief. We do certain thing or we behave in a certain manner, which makes sense to others, and about which we also make sense. And it is because we have a belief behind it. We have a belief behind. Without that belief, whatever that we do will become meaningless. It will just be very chaotic in interpersonal interaction. And Durkheim also states that it is only after having defined the belief that one can make sense of the rite. The rite that is being performed, the rituals that is being performed by the priest or by the elders within a community or by any individual in the community, the rituals that are being performed will have no meaning at all, because certain rituals are not performed regularly. Something is, or a specific ritual is performed, perhaps witnessed for the first time in the life of someone. But if the meaning is already explained to the person, even if that is being performed for the first time, someone who is observing the ritual or someone who is participating in the ritual will be able to make sense of the process of the ritual. So belief is very crucial, of belief. Without this belief, anything that is done under the name of ritual will make no sense at all. And an action to be ritual also depends on the belief of the actor, meaning someone who is performing the ritual, a priest who is performing the ritual, is trained in the ritual process, and also at the same time is also trained in the belief of the ritual, the belief behind the ritual. So the rites of passage are nothing but our belief. So whatever that we do, whatever that we manifest through our action is nothing but belief. So now I'm trying, based on this, I'm trying to understand, having examined religious and non-religious rites, I'm now trying to understand these rites of identity. By rites of identity, I'm trying to convey a meaning to the performance of the rites for the sake of identifying with certain specific groups' identity. For instance, I belong to the Rongmei community. If I take part in the rituals of my community, it means that I want to experience that feeling of belonging, the sense of belonging. I want to identify myself as Rongmei because without the identity, my interaction or my interpersonal interactions with the people around me will have no sense at all, will have no meaning at all. Mere linguistic, mere linguistic connection cannot fulfill the kind of interactions, will not be able to give the full meaning to the kind of diverse interactions that is going to be there once I step into my community's uh, context. But through the participation of the rites, through the participation of the rituals, the customary practices, I try to make sense of myself. I try to identify myself based on the group identity, based on the characteristics of the identity. So I'm trying to depend my work also. I'm trying to illuminate my work also using the theory of social identity of Henry Taswell and John C. Turner. So it is a process of social identity. I make sense of myself based on the characteristics of the group with which I identify myself. So there is a need for belonging. There is a need for, beyond the need for the physical needs, beyond the needs of other kinds of needs, there is also a need for belonging. So, but if we look, if we further now in the deep, in the later stages of my presentation, I will also further try to delve into the kinds of rituals or the customary practices the tribal Christians, or especially the Rongmei Christians, try to get involved in the process of trying to make sense of their identity based on the group identity. We often see that the practice, or rather the customary practices, are divorced from the essence, meaning that belief, the belief I was talking about just before this. So rituals or the customary practices, in fact, has no meaning without a belief. But we find that among the tribal Christians, they try to make sense of their identity, they try to make sense of themselves by participating in the customary practices, but divorced from the meanings or the belief behind the practice of the practices, of the customary practices. Now, let me come briefly to the idea, trying to tell you who are these Rongmei people. In fact, we have a well-known scholar, we had, in fact, he's no more, I highly respect him, Professor Kamei, who was once a member of Indian Historical Council too. So he is a highly respected person within the Rongmei people and also even within the Northeast. So he has written extensively on various communities, but very unfortunately, he did not write very extensively on the history of our people. So one of the most important works he had done on our people is a history of the Zelinon Nagas. So in fact, apart from these two books, one is by G.B.Pant, apart from these two books which I have shown here, in fact, it is very hard to find any readable historical text to understand the history or to know the history of the Rongmei people. Because some of the other works written by the Christians, they write history of the Zelinon people or the history of the Nagas in such a way that they try to justify the coming of the Christianity, or rather they try to write from the point of view of a Naga freedom fighter. So in that way, it is very widely scattered. So specific to the Zelinon or the Rongmei history, it's very difficult to come by any credible book apart from Gongmei Kamei and G.B.Pant. So we depend heavily on myth. We depend heavily on myth in order to conceptualize our past. So oral traditions are very crucial for us to understand who the Rongmei people are. And it is, as usual in many other communities, we believe that we were created by God. So we were once hidden after the creation, we were once hidden in a cave so that the first creation of the god may not be consumed by the evil spirits. So, and then there is also a history of the Rongmei people by one author called Dindai Gangmai. The name of the book is Mahou Taobai, where he tries to trace the origin of the Rongmei to China, uh, to one of the provinces in China. So he has in fact given a series of names of places in China and Southeast Asia, even Thailand, and how the Rongmei people have entered into not the so-called present northeastern part of India. So the kind of historical accounts of the Rongmei people are, I would rather say, not very highly scientific. It's primarily based on myth. Is primarily based on oral traditions. Even Gamumai Kamei, who has done extensive works on various peoples of the Manipur, he has in fact not known to have done much of excavation work. So most of his works are in fact without any archaeological evidence. It's more of oral traditions and oral histories. So we have got what we call mythical identity, how we were created by the divine entities and protected by the divine entities. And there is also tale of migration, as I was talking to you about the work of Dindai Gangmai, Mahou Taobai, tracing the migration story from China. And even the migration story within India, for instance, there is one place called in Manipur, Senapati district, which is bordering Nagaland district. It is believed that the Jelarong people settled in this Senapati district called Makui Longdi. From there, we further dispersed and migrated to southern part of present Manipur. So the tale of migration is also very crucial in conceptualizing our past. And for the contemporary period, what is very crucial for us to know is these constitutional identities. By constitutional identities, I mean the scheduled tribe status is granted to the various groups of the Jelarong people. In fact, I identify myself as Rongmei, and my tribe's name Rongmei has been granted as scheduled tribe status by the government of India in the year 2012. But before that, it doesn't mean that I was not recognized. My community was not recognized as scheduled tribe. My community was recognized as scheduled tribe under the name Kabui. So the name Kabui contained two sub-tribes, Rongmei and Inpui. So now these constitutional identities are very perplexing, because in my ST certificate, I write as Kabui because it was taken long ago in 2003. But my tribe name Rongmei was recognized only in the year 2012. And I was earlier, rather my community's name was earlier known as Kabui. So this constitutional identity is very perplexing, and it is also one of the reasons for the present identity conundrum that we face in our community. Now, the belief systems of the Rongmei. In fact, some people do not agree the kind of categorization that I have put forward here. Pupauchap, Heraka, Tingkau Ragong Karyak, Tingkau Ragong Chaprek. In fact, Pupauchap simply means belief systems of our ancestors, or rather ancestral beliefs. Heraka, in fact, is a name associated very closely with Rani Gaidin Liu in the 1970s. Heraka means pure religion. And it was very popular amongst the Zeme people. And there are also some followers of Heraka among the Rongmei people in Rani Gaidin's village in Manipur, but they are very negligible in numbers. And most of the Heraka followers are Jame from Assam and Nagaland. And we also have Tingkau Ragong Karek, which is found only in one village in Manipur. And it is not found in any other village, in any of the other Rongmei or Zelenong villages in whole of India, or rather Nagaland and Manipur. It is found only in one village in Manipur located near to the south of Manipur University campus. And we have got Tingkau Ragong Chabrek, which is very popular and very populous too. Most of the Rongmei people follow this belief system, Tingkau Ragong Chabrek. And one of the crucial proponents of Tingkau Ragong Chabrek was Professor Gamumai Kamei. So I have presented these four groups just for us to understand the kind of belief system which is prevalent. For instance, the Pupok Chap and Tingkau Ragong Chabrek, the first and the fourth one, they are considered to be polytheistic. And Heraka and Tingkau Ragong Kariak are considered to be monotheistic. So this is the basic difference between these four groups. Of course, there are many other intricacies in terms of the differences, which I will not go into. Now, for Professor Rongmei Kamei, religion is a worship of God by man, and it concerns with the kind of relationship that is prevalent with the God. So the idea of God is very crucial in Rongmei's conception of religion, and with which his conception of culture, his conception of rituals are also very closely related with religion. So something religion or something ritual is something that cannot be divorced from the idea of the idea of God. So this is very crucial for us for later discussion. And religion is seen as an aspect of cultural heritage and social solidarity. So religion is very crucial in order to establish a bond of relationship between the various groups of the people in a community. And amongst the Tingkau Ragong Chabrek, that is the fourth group, we find this line very common. Loss of religion is loss of culture. Loss of culture is loss of identity. So now here we can try to relate with the conception of religion of Professor Rongmei Kamei, who was one of the major proponents of, I would not say the propounder, but rather proponents of Tingkau Ragong Chabrek. We can connect this with this popular line, loss of religion is loss of culture is loss of identity. So for them, religion and culture and identity are intermingled with each other. They cannot be divorced from each other. So whatever that you do in the name of your culture, there is nothing called secular in a sense of Western conception of secular, something divorced from religion. There is nothing apart from religion. So culture, identity, they are all part of the conception of religion for Professor Rongmei Kamei and also for those who follow this Tingkau Ragong Chabrek and other religious groups. And why I have put this Surajit Chandra Sinha idea on this absence of the idea of hell and heaven amongst the tribal is that this is something that needs to be changed now. This is not so anymore, or rather perhaps it was not so at all. Because, well, among the Rongmei people, there is no idea of hell. They have no conception of hell. There is no hell amongst the Rongmei people in the religious ideology of the Rongmei people. But definitely there is a world of the dead, or rather heaven. There is heaven. That's why there are elaborate rituals performed for the dead, for the world of the dead during a funeral ritual. So let me now, next slide, Rongmei festivals. The Rongmei festivals, in fact, there are many Rongmei festivals, but let me briefly present to you these three major, Nanu, Gan Ngai, Li Ngai. And Associate Professor rather, Lanbilong Gonmei is also one of the leading scholars among the Rongmei people in Manipur. He says that Rongmei people, they do not have anything that is not associated with religion. Rongmei are not without religious fervor. Festivals are not without any religious significance. So for him, if you want to participate in the Rongmei festivals, there has to be something to do with the religion. Of course, let us not misunderstand him also. He is not trying to be a strong, agent of conversion here. He's not doing that, but rather he's trying to salvage the religious significance of the Rongmei culture or the Rongmei festivals. So now the Nanu festival is a festival celebrated on the child who are born in one particular year. So in that year, every child who is born in that year, a festival is celebrated in their name. So Nanu. So the here important part of the Nanu festival is the piercing of the earlobe. The piercing of the earlobe is very crucial on this festival. And the reason behind the piercing of the earlobe is to create, or rather send out a message of the need for procreation. Meaning, the piercing of the earlobe is to indicate the process of fornication or the loss of virginity. So the emphasis is on the procreation. God wants you, or God wants his people to procreate, expand the number of his creations, live prosperously. So that is the message which is being sent out on this festival. Ganmai is a festival. It is also called the Festival of Light. It is also considered as a post-harvest festival. And it is also considered as a festival which is a kind of a farewell to the departed souls, usually celebrated in the month of December earlier, but now it is fixed in January because of institutionalization of this festival. Lingai spelling is often written as Lih, sometimes Rih, meaning the festival of the living. So this festival of the living follows the Gangai, which is also considered as the festival of the dead, or rather the farewell for the dead, for the departed souls. So what I'm trying to say here is that all these festivals of the Rongmei people have got religious significance. They are not without any religious significance, which is emphasized by Lanbilung Gonmai. And now in the 1990s, this is the turning point amongst the Christians, for the Christians in Manipur, or rather including Naga, for the Nagas in particular. Even we can expand these even for the other tribes in Manipur, by which I would include even the Kukis. Now, the 1990s are very crucial in the history of Manipur. In fact, Manipur may be, or rather Nagaland may also be considered to have a new history since the 1990s. I'm not emphasizing on the era of LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. I'm not referring to that. Of course, it has got to do with that too. But the kind of events that was emerging in these parts of the country in the 1990s were very crucial. And let me contextualize the events of the 1990s. Let me highly contextualize it so that we can understand my presentation. Now, the Kohum Incident. Kohum is a place in the hill of Manipur. It is a hill area in Manipur, very far from the valley, towards the south of Manipur. Now, in the 1990s, sometime in 1994, when the villagers were celebrating this festival, the first one, Nanu festival. The villagers were celebrating the Nanu festival, and then merrymaking, drinking of locally brewed wine is some of the major features of many of the festivals. So during the Nanu festival, the villagers were drinking, they were singing, they were dancing. But on that fateful day, one of the Naga armed groups, one of the Naga non-state armed groups came, and they stopped the villagers from celebrating that festival, primarily on the ground that they were drinking. They were drinking wine. So they were brutally beaten up. And they were tortured. In fact, the villagers used such words. They were tortured and they were humiliated. They were not merely physically tortured, but they were humiliated too. And the incident did not end with mere beating at one particular time in one particular village, but that continued throughout the night across villages. So the Naga armed groups took the villages, or gathered the villages of 2-3 villages, and they were taken to one of the common grounds, football grounds, and they were made to dance the whole night in the rain, and they were brutally beaten up. They were made to sing and dance, and they were made to drink the remaining wine forcefully at gunpoint. These are the words of the villagers, that the villagers were threatened by the Naga armed groups at gunpoint, and they were made to drink the locally brewed wine in competition. In competition, and whoever tries to stop drinking, they were thrashed very badly. And whoever stopped dancing, or rather jumping, they were thrashed very brutally. So that incident severely impacted the lives of the non-Christians Rongmei people in the hill. So in fact, this incident was, I confirmed this incident from one of the leaders of this very group. He in fact told me that yes, that happened, but it was an unfortunate incident, and the team was led by a very low-ranking officer. So we are very sorry that it happened. So in fact, he apologized. He in fact acknowledged that event, and more importantly, it was acknowledged even by Isaac Muiva when he met Professor Rongmei in one of the conferences in United Nations, under the United Nations in New York. So it was reported that Muiva apologized to Professor Kamei for that incident in which the boys humiliated, tortured the villagers who were celebrating the Nanu festival. So it is on record, in fact. So what happened after that is that the Rongmei people, they gathered, they came in group, they mobilized their people in Assam, Manipur, and Nagaland, because the Jelirong people are settled in a contiguous area in Assam, Manipur, and Nagaland. So they mobilized the Jelirong people who are non-Christians, and they gathered in Imphal, and then they held a meeting. They formed a religious organization. Otherwise, the Rongmei people or the Jelirong people, or rather the Nagas, non-Christians Nagas, there is no inter-village religious organization among the Nagas. So for the first time in the history of the Nagas, the non-Christians Nagas, they formed an inter-village, or rather intra-community religious organization for the first time in the history. So it was formed in Manipur under the leadership of Professor Kamei and other leaders. So that was a very crucial turning point in the history of the Nagas, or the Rongmei people, in the domain of the culture or the religion. So, and then came what is known as the Indo-Naga ceasefire. I use the word Indo-Naga because it is a popularized term in the media. So the Indo-Naga ceasefire came, with which there was an attempt on the part of the Naga armed groups to placate with the elders of the villages who are not Christians. They try to establish a cordial relationship with various cultural groups. They try to minimize the conflict between the Christians and the non-Christians, because any movement to be perceived as people's movement also needs cultural identity, needs identity discourse, needs cultural elements. Without that, any movement will not be considered as people's movement. So it was very crucial for the Naga armed groups also to garner the support of the people. And to garner the support of the people also means to present the Naga movement as people's movement, which required the cultures of the Nagas. And in Manipur also, and also in other parts of the Nagaland states, the electoral process became very crucial. The idea or the discourse on development, the need for development schemes, all these became very dynamic, and people became very active participant or proactive in development discourses or development activities. and also the emerging constitutional recognitions. I was mentioning about the recognition of the Jemei, Lengmei, Rongmei in Pui in 2012. There were many other tribes which were also recognized as scheduled tribe. So, each and every linguistic group, they begin to view themselves as different tribes speaking different languages. So they also felt the need to be recognized as scheduled tribe. And you know that in Nagaland, 95% of the Nagas are Christians. So which means any debates on identity or any politics on identity are predominantly occupied by the Christians. And so is the case even in Manipur too. Thus, the significance of Christians in the cultural dynamics. Now, the Rongmei Christians and the rituals. Now, for the Rongmei people, the birth, marriage, and death, I have taken these three stages of life very crucial. There are many other rituals, but the rituals which are associated with this are very crucial for us to understand the kind of rituals or the kind of customary practices which are beginning to be practiced by the Rongmei Christians or other tribal Christians. The birth is very crucial. In fact, the Christians, for them, what is very important is the baptism. Infant baptism is very crucial. So after birth, what is important for the Rongmei Christians is the birth of the child in the church. Baptismal rite is very crucial for the Rongmei Christian. But since the 1990s, what has been observed is that the Rongmei Christians, they are also trying to practice those customary practices which their ancestors or which their fellow Rongmei people used to do, who are not Christians, who used to perform as part of the rite of passage. For instance, what is called Tamcha Puan Mai, meaning on the day of the Nanu festival, the elders of the village will gather in one place. They will get engaged in merrymaking, they will drink, they will eat. And for that, the family of the child must offer food to eat for the elders in the village. So that items of food to be offered to the elders is called tamcha. Tamcha puan mai. Puan mai means carrying. You carry that and go to the particular house where the elders will be gathered and they will eat that in the name of the child in whose name the Nanu festival is celebrated. So this is now beginning to be practiced. I witnessed that the Christians in our place, they were in fact bringing things to eat. And recently, one of the family in our church, they wanted to do this, what is called this Tamcha Puanmai. But our church leader did not agree with it, saying that this practice is unchristian. You may say that you are bringing gift. You may use the word gift, but don't say Tamcha Puanmai, because the term Tamcha Puanmai is unchristian. It is based on our customary practice, which should not be allowed in our Christian belief. So it was not allowed. But it was an isolated case. But if you see in many other churches now amongst the Rongmei, you'll find we have a neighboring village, just a few steps from my village. We have got another village there. This practice of Tamcha Puanmai is practiced on the day of Epiphany. That is celebrated on the 6th of January for the Christians. So the day on which Jesus was presented to the Gentiles or the unbelievers, or Jesus was taken out for the first time from his house and presented to the public. So in that way, they try to correlate or they try to mix up the customary practices with the Christian practice. And marriage is another very important stage of life of a person in the Rongmei people. And they are what is called Kamtan Swan. Kamtan Swan means holy marriage. Now, I'm not saying that holy marriage of the Christians believe. Holy marriage, Kamtan means you engage with a lady, and then you talk with the elders, and then engage with a lady, and then you get married with that lady. So it is called Kam Than Swan. Some say that it is Tan Mai Swan, means holy marriage also. Such words are also used even by the non-Christians. And then before the marriage, the maternal uncle of the bride has to be presented a shawl. And that ritual is called Pau Phan Ban Mai. Pau is from Kapau, Bung means maternal uncle. Ban Mai means wearing. So Mungzam Than Mai is another practice. Suppose a couple did not get married, but they eloped. If they elope, then the elders of the village of the groom will come and talk to the girl and ask whether she eloped with the boy willingly or not. If the girl said, yes, I eloped with him willingly, then problem is solved. If not, if she says that I was forced, then heavy penalty is imposed upon the family of the groom. So this practice is also still continued by the Christian Mongzamtam, because some Christians do elope. Every Christian couples do not get married in the church. So they do this, what is called Mongzam Tanmai. Even when my cousin brother was married, he is a Christian, his wife is also a Christian. When my cousin brother got married, they followed all this process, what is called Kamtan Swan, Paupan, Ban, my all this process were done. When my father was on his deathbed, he died because of cancer. My cousin sister, who is a daughter of a Baptist church pastor, she came along with her to be groomed and presented a shawl to my father as what is called Paupan Ban Mai. So even the family of a pastor of a church follows what is conventionally considered as customary practice, and they are not perceived to be religious by them. And even for the death rituals, we have giving birth to the ritual, dressing up the dead body using the traditional attires, not just coat, necktie, white shirt, but the traditional attires of the Rongmei people. And then the practice of waiting for someone who has gone to give message of the dead to come back for the burial to take place. Someone who has gone to give the message to far-flung villages, relatives about the death of a person must return. Before the return of that person, the body cannot be buried. So these customary practices also followed. And on the 5th day of the death of the person, the Rongmei people, they exhume, meaning they dig out upper portion of the grave, not the body, upper portion of the grave, and then they make it very hard, and then they level it again, and then they pray for the soul of the dead. This is again done by the Christian, and it is considered that the grave diggers must be given proper food. If not, if the grave diggers are not given proper food, then the soul of the dead will not have peace in the world of the dead. So this is also believed by the Christians. So special focus is given to feed the grave diggers, and this is found even among the Christians. And there are many other rituals followed by the Rongmei Christians, giving gifts to the sisters, elder sisters or younger sisters, which is called Potsumai. And there are many other customary practices followed by the Christians.
Kamai, can I,
And
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you start winding up, because we have many viewers. I think there'll be a lot of questions after your talk.
yeah, just 2 slides left.
Yes,
After
yes,
this,
yes.
just one slide. Yeah.
Yes.
So now, if one examines the customary practices found among the tribal Christians, I in fact try to use these 2 concepts: purgatorial culture and divorced culture. Next slide, next slide. By purgatorial culture, I mean I'm trying to convey the sense of guilt amongst the tribal Christians for having condemned their ancestral customary practices, beliefs, and now they're trying to plaque it with the customary practices, or plaque it with the elders, plaque it with the communities, plaque it with their ancestral identity. So they are neither completely into the Christian world, rather neither completely into the non-Christian world. So it is like a purgatory according to Christian theology. You're neither into hell nor into heaven. You're in the world of the dead. You're yet to step into hell or heaven through purgatory. So purgatorial culture, the kind of culture, the customary practices practiced by the Christians may also be considered as purgatorial culture, because it is not culture in the sense of the essence of the culture of the Rongmei people, and they do not accept it fully. They try to only embrace the practice and not the belief behind the practice. So another one is called the divorced culture. The kind of customary practices that they have is completely divorced from their community, from the belief, from their identity, from the ideology of the belief. It is perhaps only for the sake of practicing, which they claim is for the sake of identity, the rights of identity. They do it for the sake of identity. Whatever that they do, whatever that they perform is just to attain the sense of identity of being a Rongmei. And to conclude, I find that the identity discourse within the Rongmei people, whether it is constitutional identity or mythical identity, or even with regard to the rights of identity, is still in a state of uh, inconclusiveness, something which is yet to crystallize. And they are caught in a web of dilemma. They don't know what to do, because their Christian ideology, the Christian teachings tells them not to do anything which is of un-Christian or their ancestors, but their desire to identify with the Rongmei identity seems to compel them to embrace certain customary practices which are without any beliefs or which are without any essence. So conflicting views on ethnic culture is very much prevalent among the Rongmei people. And with that, I would like to end, and I would expect a very good number of feedback from the learned listeners. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kamei. It was a very rich and complex paper. I now invite questions. Please unmute and identify yourself and ask the question. Anyone can ask, just unmute yourself and start. Start, Dr. Panda, please start.
Can I?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Kamei, for a very, very informative presentation. In fact, it was many things which I never even heard about it. It was very informative and also educative for me. I have a small inquiry, not directly related to your presentation, but since you hail from that region, maybe it might be useful for me to even hear directly from your voice how do you in fact think about it. Now, Northeast as the region of India, as a part of India, has a long sense of alienation, and this continued for a number of decades until the Modi government came into the power. Now, Modi government has taken many proactive measures to remove this feeling of alienation by many economic development projects. And also earlier it was felt that since this is a very sensitive region of India, foreign powers should not be allowed to partner in any of the Indian initiative to develop that part of the country. But now the Modi government again has removed that kind of self-imposed apprehension and has invited Japan. And Japan and India are now cooperating very, very closely, and also engaged in many development projects. And from the Japanese side, Japan also has some emotional and historical connection with that part, especially Manipur and Nagaland during the World War II. Now, my question is, in your understanding from ground reality of your based on your perception, if you would like to, if suppose I would request you to put in the scale of 1 to 10, how far the sense of alienation has been removed? Please. This is a
can we
difficult thing, but at least I would like to hear the feeling of somebody from that particular region.
yeah can
Sitting
we
in
take
Delhi, we can't understand that.
can we take one more question? MA English, please unmute.
Okay, good evening. And I'm Dr. Kakoli Dey from Engineering College in Greater Noida. And thank you so much, Professor Kamei, for your wonderful presentation of Rongmei Naga. I am also personally, very interested in the whole of languages of Northeast India, and that's also was my part of my research for so long. And I can see that this Rongmei Naga, a very good group, is there in also in Silchar, Assam. And what I feel, and I'm born and brought up in Nagaland, stayed in Meghalaya, and a part of my life is also there in Assam. So what I've seen from my studies that this Christianity and all these things are being, this is a colonial thing which has come up when the missionaries have come. But if I look back into the history of all the indigenous population in Northeast, they were all nature worshippers. And that's what is also applicable to all the human race. First, it was kind of animistic and nature worshippers. Religion, the word religion has come much, much later. So I think this Rongmei Naga, being a very small community, they were always in some pockets, as far as I'm talking about the group in Silchar in Assam. So, and very close to the Bengali habitat. And thus, I can see that some of them in this recent years, they have also adopted Hinduism. Some they have adopted Buddhism. Some have also adopted Christianity. Despite at the home domain, they maintain their cultural identity, as you have said, some kind of rituals and practices. The same thing also happened and is happening in Kokborok in Tripura also. They have once lost their identity to this conversion of Hinduism. And now today I can see from my research that the new generations are no longer interested in the Hinduism also, neither their own personal home identity, but the present generation is coming out of the Tripura. They are converting themselves into Christianity. So these are the things which are very problematic, and which I think I think the researchers, more of research has to do. What are the socio-cultural factors, or why people are doing like this? I think we should look into it more. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other question? Then Kamai can answer them all together. Any other question?
Can I
Yes,
ask a question, Dr. Jain? This
yes,
is Nandini
Nandini.
Bhattacharya. Yes, thank you.
Nandini, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I will go back as M.A. Kakoli has come forward. I will go back to the British period. British, they imposed Christianity. I mean, now it is a debated issue, though, but they imposed Christianity, and because of the violence, because of the war, because of the continuous ambush and violent encounter, the ethnic identity, the ethnic rights, the ethnicity itself, it had been to some extent erased during the British period. After the British period, I mean, in the entire Northeast, but Nagaland especially was a very violent area. So when after the independence, or the ethnic communities are trying to revive their indigenous culture, indigenous tradition. But my question is, how authentic is the indigenous tradition and culture? Because the British, they had written a lot about the indigenous culture. At the same time, they destroyed it. this is my one observation or question, and this is a very fascinating paper. And secondly, this revivalism, is it taking back the communities, or is it taking forward? This is, I am an outsider, so this I want to really know from an insider, because I'm intrigued by this. And there is in entire Northeast and entire Eastern Himalayas, there is a revival movement. And interestingly, the revival movement is taking place, taking clue from the British ethnographic narratives. Thank you.
Kamai, can I also ask one question?
Ma'am,
Yes,
Lipika here.
Okay, Lipika, go ahead.
Hi, Kamei. Congratulations for your informative I do not allow the wrong or age-old traditional practices. What do you do? Do you go against the church to keep your culture alive, or you leave that practice for your community completely as it goes against Christianity? Thank you.
Kamai, I also have one question to ask. It must be several centuries gradually that this region converted to Christianity. So how are they going to access their past? What is the means by which they are going to access their past? How is that past alive for them to access? This is something that Nandini also asked. I also have this question. Thank you. I think you can take the questions now together.
Yeah.
First, Professor Panda, what is the scale of 1 to 10?
What is the
Sir.
scale you are putting?
Sir, you have put me into a very difficult footing.
Never mind your personal observation.
Yeah, why I say footing, I'm not doubting the feeling of nationalism of the people there, but I'm just saying that one has not conducted any kind of research to do that, any kind of survey to do that. That's why.
I think you
So
can
I think,
answer Professor Pandey personally.
Yeah.
It will be
Yeah.
safer.
And I'll just say that the feeling of nationalism amongst the people is something that is not comparable with anyone.
Yes.
Every Indian is an Indian, and that feeling is very much there. And I think there is no parameter to judge the feeling, the element, or the degree of nationalism. It is very much there. And just as any other Indians, we are very much Indian of this great nation. And I think that would best answer your question, sir, because I'm not a statistician who had done a survey on that, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And to that question, to that point on the tribal belief system being labeled as animistic, I would say that one has to be a little cautious of such use of the term animistic, because what is important to my understanding, what is important to understand the people is to understand the position of the people, to understand the people's community from their own worldview. If we consciously or unconsciously impose our outside worldview to understand the worldview of the people we study, perhaps there could be some difficulties for us to fully capture the worldview of the people. So why I say is this, because Professor Kamei has in fact very severely refuted the use of the term animism to describe the belief system of the tribal people. For him, the tribal belief systems are not animistic or nature worship. For them, the idea of religious association with the objects in the nature around them is because of the belief in the dwelling of the spirit in the objects. So it is not the object per se which is worshipped, but it is a spirit, or rather also the reverence for the dwellings of the spirit in the object. So it is not the object, it is not fetishism. It is not fetishism. So that may perhaps caution us in understanding the religious worldview of the tribal people. And how authentic is the indigenous culture in order to understand the culture in view of the distortions by the colonizers or the Western or European anthropologists? And to answer this question, let me come back to the first slide. That is the last second point of the first slide. The position taken by Victor Turner, that the social world is a world in becoming and not a world in being. Meaning the idea of culture, the idea of religion, identity, everything is in the process of evolution or in the process of changing. It is embracing new elements, perhaps every day or every generation, every hundreds of years, every centuries, new things are being added on. And I think there is no shame in saying that my community has changed. My ancestors were like that, now we are like this. Despite the discontinuity, this is also our culture. That was also our culture. And I think there is no community in this world, if a community is to be believed to have comprised of human beings, to claim that nothing has changed or nothing is except primordial. Whatever is considered to be primordial is definitely has undergone the process of change. So it's very redundant to say again that nothing but change is the only constant. So change is very much a part of the cultures of the tribal people too, or any other community. Let me not use the word tribal here. So in terms of the authenticity as raised here, every change embraced by the people, every cultural customary practices or belief which has shared common acquiescence, I think it has attained its legitimacy too, or the authenticity. For instance, the Nagas are believed to have, and I would say, I use the word believe because I'm not a part of this oral tradition, oral history. I did not experience it. That is the head hunting. But I would say that it is a belief because I did not experience it. I hear it from oral tradition, not even from oral history, because no one seems to have alive, no one seems to be alive now who experienced the head hunting. In fact, my very ancestor, my grandfather's grandfather was a headhunter. He could not stay in the village because of the head hunting, so he had to go to other villages and finally settle in Manipur Valley. So he was also a proponent or a practitioner of head hunting. So we are descendants of headhunters, but we do not practice any longer. But I would authenticate, I would say, I would accept that yes, headhunting was my culture, is my culture, is in the sense I try to relate my past with oral traditions, with narratives of the practice of the cultures of my people, though I do not practice any longer. So what is not practiced any longer at present is not necessarily inauthenticated.
Yes.
And
May I just add just one word? Actually, I am not criticizing you. I endorse fully what you say. And there is a great book, I'm sure you have read it, Hobsbawm Ranger, Invention of Tradition. I just wanted to refer to that point, that what we refer to as authentic culture, in almost in all the cases, these are all invented traditions. It is true for all the communities in Northeast India, in every part of India. That's what I just wanted to imply. That's all. Thank you very much.
Nandini ji, but he says everything is an invention of tradition.
Yes.
Tradition is invented everywhere, not just in the Northeast. It's invented in every country.
Yeah. That's what I just referred to.
Yeah.
I seek apology from you if I have sounded as a refutation. If my statement has sounded as a refutation.
Not at all. Yours is a very rich presentation. Thank you very much.
And is revivalism taking back the community? I feel that the very word of revivalism is intended to make the community forward. Of course, now the word forward may be very pejorative also, may be used pejoratively to say that certain communities are backward, so we need to take forward. Here, when I say forward, I use it in the sense of moving, continuing with the culture by imbibing new things, because uh, even what has been practiced in the past and now, even if you say that one is reclaiming or reviving, but the way it is practiced is never the same any longer. It's never the same any longer. Every stage, every phase of culture is always evolving. So the very word revivalism also means that it is no longer what is of the past. It is something in present believed to be in the past. So it is something always new. Culture is always in the process of evolving into something, a new entity.
Yes.
So now, whether it is taking us backward, I feel that it depends on how we look at the culture. For instance, certain culture, as viewed by anthropologists, European anthropologists and the Britishers, they always try to condemn. For instance, even the idea of this, the practice and the idea behind headhunting has got, in fact, a very rather beautiful belief behind headhunting.
Okay,
There is a very
Kamei, there is one more question. I think that we will make the last. Kavita, please unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi, Kamai. I just wanted to ask you that how does an entity like state or law then engage with custom? For example, if there are some regressive tendencies in customary practices, for example, the rights of the marginalized, or the traditional hierarchies which have existed, which are then getting I don't know, reinvented in the name of tradition or in the name of custom. How what is your perspective? Like, how does the law, the formal law of the state should engage with those challenges in the community?
This will be the last question that we will take, Kamei.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. My view on the state culture interface is contextual. Why I say contextual is because there is also positive aspect and there is also negative aspect. Positive aspect I say is because if we look into various communities, there are certain communities considered to be dying. For instance, even in Manipur also, we have got some communities whose linguistic groups are considered to be dying. So there is a need for protection, and that comes very efficient, effective, and it is possible only through the intervention of the state. And also the fact that the constitutional identities are very crucial for the intervention of the state for the welfare of the people also tells us that there is a very close interface between the state and the culture or the cultural identity of the people. But if we also try to look at the state culture interface from the other perspective, we find it's very negative. Negative in the sense that it is patronizing to some extent and also causes certain negative impacts on the culture of the people. I would give you the example of my community, the Rongmei people. The Rongmei people in India, Manipur, Nagaland, they celebrate festivals, these Gangai festivals, not on a particular day. The day of the festival is decided by their belief in the part of the lunar part. So they look at the moon and decide the day. So there were times when 3-4 villages celebrated festivals on different days. Some villages started celebrating the festivals after the celebration of the same festival in other villages. Now, with the intervention of the state and also the needs of the people, the demands of the people, they wanted to institutionalize the festival so that they receive financial support from the state, also recognition from the state, because the fact that the state is recognizing the festival means declaration of that festive day as holiday. So the state cannot give holiday to each and every village, but it has to be decided by the people and the state and fixed on a particular date. So state-sponsored festivals also came up because state has to participate in the festivals. So state fixed along with the people a specific date. So now the customary practices which of the festival based on the lunar movement is now, we can say, distorted. Now they do not depend on the lunar part. It depends on the decision of the state and the people, which has been already fixed. And also, if we look at the other negative impact which we can find in the interface between the state and the custom is also, if we look at the right of inheritance of the landed property amongst the tribal people, it varies across tribe to tribe. Some tribe will have a practice of ancestral lands inherited by the eldest son, some by the youngest son. And some communities, the sons who are not supposed to inherit the ancestral property, they are supposed to move out and establish their own village. And there is chieftainship system. Now, all these are very problematic for the state in order to work with the people for the welfare of the people, which is related with the land.
Yes.
For instance, the construction of dam, roads, for instance, the constructions of even say water bodies, control over the natural resources. Who will decide to give the land to the state when a state cannot work merely on a single village? State usually occupy 5-10 villages, huge areas. So for that, they sometimes come into conflict with different tribal, different customary groups, different cultural groups. So it's conflicting. So in that way, what we find is that state try to infuse their governance system, the state system. And with that, we find a decay or a gradual depletion of the customary practices amongst the customary traditional institutions, the traditional institutions of the tribal villages. And without that, without the dilution of the traditional institution, it is not possible at all for the state to be very effectively operational in the tribal lands, where the governance of the village or where the lives of the village are governed by the traditional institutions, which are again ultimately governed by the customary practices.
Kamei, I have to thank you for a very rich presentation. You have made us aware of so many complexities of that region, which we were not aware of. And you've, excited us to learn about that region and to perhaps read something about that region. On behalf of all the listeners, all the viewers, I thank you for a very rich presentation. Thank you all for coming and attending. And I'm sure all of you have learned a lot from this presentation. Thank you, Kamei, and thank you all for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very beautiful presentation. Very rich presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Kamei.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.